Welcome, everyone. We're diving deep today into a really fundamental piece of U.S. patent law, the enablement requirement.
That's right. We're looking at Section 2164 of the MPEP, the Manual of Patent Examining Procedure.
And this section interprets a law, specifically 35 U.S.C. 112A. Basically, it's all about how much you need to explain your invention in your patent.
Exactly. It's crucial. Think of it as the rule book for making sure your patent actually teaches something useful.
And before we really jump in, we absolutely have to give a big thank you to Mike Shepard.
Oh, definitely. Mike's the creative director behind this whole series, and his vision has really made this possible using AI audio to make these dense legal topics more accessible.
Couldn't agree more. Okay, so Section 2164, enablement. What's the absolute core principle here?
Well, it boils down to this. Your patent specification in the written part has to teach someone who's, skilled in that specific technical field.
The person having ordinary skill in the art.
Yeah.
Right, that phrase.
Precisely. It has to teach that person how to both make and use the invention you're claiming, and crucially, without needing undue experimentation.
Okay, undue experimentation. That sounds like a key phrase we'll need to unpack. But first, why have this requirement? What's its purpose?
It really serves two main functions. First, it guarantees the public gets a real benefit from the patent grant. You get exclusivity for a while, but in return, you have to properly disclose your invention, share the knowledge.
Makes sense. The quid pro quo, what's the second function?
The second is about scope. It ensures that the breadth of your patent claims what you're saying you own actually matches up with what you've taught the public how to do.
Ah, so you can't just describe a single screw and then claim ownership over all possible fastening technologies.
Exactly. Your claims can't vastly outstrip your teaching. The disclosure has to be commensurate with the claim scope.
Got it. Now, the summary mentions that you don't need to disclose a perfect, commercially ready product. It brings up a case, CFMT versus Yield Up.
Yeah, that's a really good illustration. In that case, the invention was about a better way to clean semiconductor wafers. Super delicate process.
Right.
And the court said, look, even if this patent only described a partial improvement, not the absolute final, perfect, bug-free cleaning machine, it was still enough for enablement.
Why?
Because it did teach someone skilled in wafer cleaning how to make and use that specific improvement. Enablement isn't about perfection or market readiness. It's about whether the instructions work to achieve what's claimed.
Okay, so sufficient instruction for the claimed advance, not necessarily the ultimate product. That clarifies things.
Precisely. It's about providing the roadmap for that invention.
Now, another tricky point mentioned is the difference between enablement and the written description requirement. They sound similar, both under 112A.
They are indeed related, both housed in 112A, but they tackle different questions. Written description asks, did the inventor actually possess, conceive of, the specific invention they are claiming at the time they filed? Does the spec show they had it?
Okay, so it's about proving you actually invented that thing.
Right. Enablement, on the other hand, asks, does the specification teach someone else how to make and use the claimed invention?
How can those be different? If you teach how to make it, don't you inherently describe it?
Not necessarily in the way the law requires for written description. You could theoretically describe a process or a set of components in such detail that someone could build and use something that falls within a claim you add later. But your original description might not have clearly shown that you specifically thought of and described that particular combination or variation as your invention back then.
That's subtle. So you might enable more than you strictly described initially.
Right.
And that matters for amendments.
Exactly. It becomes really critical when you try to change or add claims during prosecution. You need both written description support and enablement for the final claims.
Okay, this leads us nicely into what seems like a really central piece, the In re Wands case and its 8 factors. What are these?
Yes, Wands, foundational stuff. The court in Wands basically said, figuring out if experimentation is undue isn't a simple yes-no, it depends. So they laid out 8 factual considerations to guide the analysis.
The famous Wands factors.
Let's hear them.
Okay, let's see if I can list them out. You've got the breadth of the claims, the predictability or unpredictability of the relevant field.
Like biotech being less predictable than basic mechanics, maybe.
Spot on. Then the sheer quantity of experimentation that would be needed, how much direction or guidance the patent itself provides.
Instructions, examples.
Right. The presence or absence of actual working examples in the patent, the nature of the invention itself. Is it pioneering or just an improvement?
Okay.
And finally, the state of the prior art, what was already known, and the relative skill level of that person skilled in the art we talked about.
Wow, that's a lot to juggle. So examiners and courts look at all these things together. Exactly. It's a holistic analysis. No single factor is necessarily determinative. They weigh them all to get a feel for whether making and using the invention across its full claim scope would require unreasonable effort from someone skilled in the field based only on the patent's teaching and general knowledge.
And these factors are still the go-to framework. The summary mentions the recent Amgen v. Sanofi Supreme Court case.
Absolutely, still relevant. Amgen powerfully reaffirmed the WAN's principles. The Supreme Court really drove home the point, quoting the Federal Circuit. The more one claims, the more one must enable.
Simple enough. What happened in Amgen?
Well, Amgen had claims covering a whole class, a genus of antibodies. They were defined functionally. Any antibody that could bind to a specific protein target and block it in a certain way.
Okay, so defined by what they do, not exactly what they are.
Precisely. And while Amgen showed some examples that worked, the court found the claims were just too broad. To figure out all the other potential antibodies, potentially millions, that could also do that job, that would require a massive amount of trial and error screening. Way beyond just following the patent's recipe, it was deemed undue experimentation.
So Amgen is an example of enablement failing because the claims were too broad for the teaching.
Correct. Compare that to WAN's itself. The invention there involved making specific antibodies for hepatitis B. The court found that patent was enabled.
Why the difference?
Because in WAN's, the patent gave pretty substantial guidance. The methods for making antibodies were relatively well established at the time, and the claims weren't trying to cover every conceivable antibody that did a certain job. The required experimentation was considered reasonable.
That contrast really highlights the link between claim breadth and the required level of detail in the disclosure.
It absolutely does, especially in unpredictable arts like antibody development.
What about working examples? Are they always required? You mentioned them as a WAN's factor.
Not strictly required, no. Especially in fields considered predictable. Think simple mechanical devices. If the principles are well understood and you describe it clearly, drawings might be enough. A skilled mechanic could likely build it.
But less predictable fields.
Like biotech, complex chemistry. Yeah, their working examples become much more important. They provide concrete evidence that, hey, this actually works and here's proof. It helps show the inventor truly possessed the invention and that it's not just theoretical.
Can one good example ever be enough, maybe for a broader claim?
Sometimes, yes. If that single example clearly demonstrates a general principle or technique that someone skilled in the art could reliably apply across the claimed range without, excessive new research or invention.
Without that undue experimentation again.
Exactly. But the burden is on the patent applicant to show that the example is truly representative and enabling for the whole scope claimed.
It really does sound like a constant balancing act. Claim enough, teach enough.
That's the heart of the enablement doctrine. Balancing the inventor's right to exclude with the public's right to understand and build upon the invention. The patent scope should match the contribution to the art.
And it always comes back to whether the necessary experimentation is undue, not whether any experimentation is needed.
Absolutely critical distinction. Some experimentation is often expected. Even routine tinkering or optimization might be needed. It's only when it crosses the line into unreasonable effort, excessive trial and error, or requires invention beyond the patent's teaching, that's when it becomes undue. And those WAN's factors help draw that line.
Before we wrap up, the MPP section now includes a discussion of United Therapeutics Corp. v. Liquidia-Tex, Inc. Why add that one?
Good question. United Therapeutics dealt with enablement for claims related to achieving specific pharmaceutical properties. In that case, things like particle-size distribution for an inhaled drug.
Ah, okay. So claiming a result.
Kind of. Claiming a formulation defined by achieving certain specific, maybe tricky to get physical characteristics. Including this case reminds examiners to look closely at whether the patent really teaches how to consistently achieve those claimed properties across the board.
So if you claim a specific result or property, you better show how to reliably get there.
Pretty much. It reinforces that principle. You need to enable the full scope, including any specific functional outcomes or properties you're claiming, without undue experimentation.
Okay, this has been incredibly useful. To distill it down, what are the absolute must-remember takeaways for our listeners on enablement?
1. Your patent must teach a skilled person how to make and use the claimed invention. 2. It has to do so without requiring undue experimentation. 3. This ensures meaningful disclosure and aligns claim scope with teaching. 4. Perfection isn't needed, but sufficiency is key. 5. The WANS factors are the framework for judging undue. 6. Broader claims, especially in unpredictable arts, need more robust teaching, as highlighted by Amgen. 7. It's all about balancing the inventor's rights with the public benefit.
Excellent summary. And now, the essential disclaimer.
Yes. Please remember, everyone, this discussion was generated using AI tools. While we aim for accuracy, there might be errors.
It's for educational purposes only. This is not legal advice. For real guidance, you absolutely need to consult the official MPEP itself, or better yet, a qualified patent attorney or agent.
Definitely. And do check out the other deep dives in this series covering different MPEP sections.
Okay, one final thought to leave you with. Mull this over. How does this enablement requirement, which might seem like just a legal hurdle for inventors, actually serve the bigger picture? Think about that exchange: the inventor gets a limited monopoly, but only if they provide a disclosure detailed enough for the public to learn from and eventually improve upon. How does that undue experimentation standard try to keep that bargain fair for everyone? Something to consider.